You're listening to Breaking New Ground. In this podcast, we provide thought-provoking conversations for those looking to begin or advance their entrepreneurial real estate goals.
Together, we'll venture into the world of commercial real estate with entrepreneurs who challenge the status quo, building innovative paths with bold approaches.
We're your hosts. I'm John Pugh, a real estate developer and investor.
And I'm Rachel Walters, a real estate marketing expert. Throughout our episodes, we'll bring in real estate trailblazers, creating a space for inspiring conversations surrounding commercial real estate.
Pugh Management is proud to sponsor the podcast Breaking New Ground. Pugh Management is a premier developer for mixed-use, multifamily, and industrial properties. We love to develop places to live, work, and play. Pugh Management partners with family offices and institutional investors on projects in New England and Central Florida. Check us out online at pughmgmt.com.
Hey everyone, today's guest is Lauren Campbell. Lauren is the founder of the Archer Group, a real estate brokerage and development firm in the Tampa and St. Petersburg, Florida area. She's an industry leader who utilizes placemaking as a key piece of her development strategy. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for having me, John and Rachel. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you here and share your experience with some of our listeners, our audience, and just get into some fun topics. I think one of the things that I've always been impressed by since we met, about 2 years ago now, is just your ability to really, from what I've observed, is to go start from the ground up and build great relationships and a great business that you've got now today, and just excited to explore that and some of the different topics that kind of come up over the course of things in our conversation. So to kind of get going, would love to hear kind of from you, I know you've got roots in the Northeast, and then You've been here for a long time though, and just love to hear kind of your story and where did you start and kind of how did you end up to where you are today. And I understand that That's a long journey, so we may jump in from here and there, but would love to hear that.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it, and thank you for the compliment. So you're right. I grew up in New York, on Long Island. I'm a, bridge and tunnel kid, as they call us up there, and moved to Florida for college. I attended University of South Florida here in Tampa, which is how I ended up in the Tampa Bay area. And I was studying architecture originally. My goal was to get my master's in architecture, and I really wanted to design hospitality, like hotel concepts. I was really excited about doing that design work. I'd seen some really incredible things as a kid in New York and through travels with family and friends, and just thought that was something that really spoke to me. The idea of, being able to create a place that people went to have a great time and to experience that with friends and family just really was interesting to me. I'd also say architecture spoke to me because my mother was a second generation, and now I'm a third generation broker. And I think a lot of people either dive right into what it is their parents do or reject it completely. And I ended up doing both. So grew up in my mom's residential brokerage, which was my grandmother's before her. My grandmother got here on a boat just beyond Ellis Island in 1949. And met my grandfather within a year and moved to Brooklyn. And my grandfather was an incredible human being with a soft spot for anyone having a down and out time, and went out of his way to do things for people who really couldn't afford to compensate him. And my grandmother, as much as she also was a loving and caring person, wanted the rent money. And so she took it upon herself and started leasing and then selling real estate to friends and family to make sure that the mortgage was met, and saw a great opportunity on Long Island during the early 50s with the VA loan program that was in place, and started selling houses and moved the whole family out of Brooklyn and out onto Long Island, where I grew up in her brokerage. My father was in construction. Yeah, it was really fun. I remember as a kid working on the MLS books when they were still physical book copies.
Wow.
And my mom would pay me $20 and I thought I was rich. And she was probably like, yes, I don't have to do that. But my dad was in commercial construction. He started out building houses, but by the time I can remember, he was working in the city on some really cool projects, doing build out kind of like the Midtown Manhattan area. And I remember thinking, gosh, that is just so cool. I want to do that. And his guidance was stay far away from the hammer. You'll make more money and your body won't hurt. I don't know how true that is anymore. I think that's a really lucrative profession to go into construction. We're definitely missing those bodies today, but that was his advice. So I ended up in architecture. Got to architecture school, loved the first 2 years. It was very theoretical. It was very much hand drafting, all of the things you romanticize about going to architecture school. John knows. And
Yep.
and then I met the CAD program. And I said, oh, AutoCAD, you are not for me. And I remember finding out from a professor that the first handful of years I would be in architecture, I would be doing AutoCAD and only AutoCAD and not even my own designs.
Yeah.
It's all you do. Yeah,
Oh,
it's all you do. So I was like, this is not for me. I need to like abort mission, jump ship, whatever. And it was during the recession, and I saw all of my friends in that program graduate without jobs, and I thought, oh, this is bad. So was taking one of my last courses actually, and it was a course called The City. And it was really about development and the history of development throughout time. And it was just fascinating. And I thought, oh my God, that's what I really want to do. That guy or girl tells the architect what to do, right? Like they're in charge of what's happening. The architect isn't even in charge. So immediately it was like, how do I do this? My professor laughed and said, well, you could go to school for it, but you're much better off just getting into real estate, no matter what that looks like or means, and just kind of working your way into it until you're doing development. And I thought, well, how? And he's like, nobody knows. You just have to do it. And then one day you are doing it.
There's no path. Yeah.
Right? But was he wrong, John?
Yes and no. He was kind of right. There's no real path. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah. So, had to like come home, shuffling my feet, looking down, tell my mom, okay, I'm doing it. I'm getting my real estate license. I'm going to do this. And ended up graduating with an art history degree, which is like, I am super fun at parties and museum and like trivia night. But yeah, did not go back to New York and start a career in the arts like I thought I might. Ended up at CBRE actually. And while I was there, I was working in research where we did economic analysis and white papers and quarterly reports and like literally every boring thing that you can possibly think of that goes into like the knowledge side of brokerage, that you're just shuffling paperwork to your clients about the market. I was writing all of that. And it was so enlightening. I was able to learn every product type that we covered. I was able to understand the market from the ground up, and it was such a great foundation to my career. And I think it made me that much more successful to have had that. And at the same time to work with the other brokers that were in the room, because I could see how they thought through processes. I could see how they were going after clients. I could see what a pitch looked like. And I was getting all that experience while being paid, which was great. But the time came where I really just wanted to do it myself, frankly. And it was at a point in our market here in Tampa, the recession was over, but it was still lingering here. And so there just wasn't the room for me at the bigger brokerages. I didn't have the experience or the book of business. So I left and I started working at a boutique retail firm, which I loved. And that was when I realized that a lot of the things that drove me into architecture could still drive my journey through real estate. And that was the idea of ground floor activation, of placemaking, of having a sense of control over a narrative or a storyline for a neighborhood, of making people feel things and helping people realize dreams that they have, whether it's a new business or to experience a certain thing while they're traveling, whatever it is, that you can actually control that. And you can control the narrative of an entire neighborhood if you do a really good job with how people are experiencing the street, right? And I think in architecture, we talk a lot about Jane Jacobs and the street ballet. But that's really what has always interested me. And so I pivoted, started doing third-party leasing and sales for retail specifically, and ended up with a client who his firm owns a majority portion of land and property and buildings in St. Petersburg. And after about a year and a half of working with him from a distance, he invited me to come on board and head up basically his entire real estate arm. So I was managing probably $40 million worth of assets, from property management and leasing to sales and acquisitions, to development and adaptive reuse projects. And I really got such a great experience doing that. And it was so cool. It was like when you're learning how to drive and you've got the steering wheel and the gas pedal, but there's also the guy sitting next to you who's got his foot on that second brake. It was, it was great.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. I think so. Is that part of where the return on experience, this concept that you're really kind of interested? Is that part of where that comes from? Is that experience, or is that something you've developed yourself over time?
That's a great question. I would say that return on experience is first of all, we were talking before the show, like, it's not my word. As much as I'd love to say I coined it, it is not. It does not belong to me. It's definitely a word that we don't hear a lot in our industry. And I guess to answer your question, maybe I should explain what it is. So you have, typically on a pro forma, two-dimensionally speaking, you have a return on investment. And I think a lot of us know what return on investment means, but you know, the short story is it's a math problem. Return on investment says, I spent this much, I earned this much. Am I in the black or am I in the red, right? And it gives you a number. But it's all quantitative things. It's how much was maintenance? What is my, what am I recouping in CAM? How much was my purchase price? What kind of rent can I get in this space? And so on and so forth. And that's great. And obviously that's the bones of a project, and what makes what we do not a charity is like getting it to drive that ROI and makes it lucrative. But ROE is a little different. It's more quantitative, but it's still measurable. So return on experience really is about taking something and making the return of that something bigger than itself, right? So like growing something or driving ROI exponentially with quantitative things. Yeah. What does that mean? It could be pop-ups. It could be a neighborhood coffee shop. It could be a lot of things. I'll give you an example in a minute, but to answer your question, it started in architecture school. And then it just kind of grew really big when I was there over in St. Pete with that property owner and that investor. It was something he was incredible at. His name was.
And I think to that point, what you guys were able to do in the Edge District, he's talking about the Edge District in St. Petersburg, and it's quintessentially placemaking, right? Using certain types of tenants, certain types of thinking around who the tenant mix is and where they kind of fit in on the street. And the group that you worked with, just for people's reference, they owned a large main retail strip in the downtown, or adjacent to the downtown corridor of St. Petersburg. And I mean, you and John were able to create this, like you said, outsized effect in terms of impact on the overall value of the properties in that neighborhood by very strategically and precisely thinking about who are the tenants to go in these small, older buildings that were these older retail buildings, which transform the neighborhood, right? So you were saying that the qualitative pieces, elements they're not that measurable, right? When you're thinking about them, when you're trying to connect all the dots, but when you've got all the dots connected, there's a beautiful picture, and that picture is it can be quantified, because in the end, you guys created a huge amount of value with those properties, and that there's now a massive amount of investment and development from institutional players that were. St. Petersburg wasn't even on the map until till you and John Dow and the group over there, one or two, some other investors, really put your stamp on that in that area. And so that's what to me is like a really interesting thing to say. Okay, you can assemble a series of smaller interventions in a certain type of area. Like, I don't know what the area is. We've actually had this conversation a little bit, like how far apart can these places be and what types of restaurants and bars and pop-ups experience, how do you knit them all together to create this impact, this return on experience? And it's very evident when you go over there today that maybe it's not evident, right? Because if you're there today, you're like, oh, this is amazing. Look at this place. But I remember driving over there 7 years ago, and there was literally nothing.
Yeah.
There were wig shops and checks cash places in that area. And now it's beautiful, and there's German, and there's there's Moroccan, there's every type of restaurant you can imagine, and there's these massive institutional players building 500-unit buildings where there was nothing. So I don't know. To me, that's exciting, and I definitely admire what you guys were able to do there. And I'm just curious, kind of from how do you take that success and that experience, and I guess how do you translate that into the future of what you want to be involved with? And
great question. So John deserves a lot of credit. He was working on a lot of that long before I showed up, and I was there, and it was amazing, and I think I added a lot of value. And he's still a client of mine, right? So you introduced me in the beginning. I have Archer Group with my partner Kyle Masterson, and we do brokerage still to this day. We also do development, our own, and we do development consulting as well. And I think that component of our company is probably the most interesting part to me. I've met some incredible people along the way, before and after my journey with Eastman Equity, and have retained a lot of people as clients. But what I learned how to do at Eastman was how to take those clients and turn them into partners, which is really what's interesting to me, right? So unfortunately, my mom and dad forgot to make me a trust fund when I was a kid. I know. So I'm not running around with, tens of millions of dollars of trust fund money to just do what I wish with. But I have vision, and my partner Kyle has vision, and I think we've done a great job so far, the year we've been in business, of taking what we both have, that experience of placemaking and return on experience, and replicating it, right? So it's easy to point to one place and say, well, that is of a time and place, right? You had COVID and the big push to Florida during COVID, and you were lucky because you got in there before this, and of course that neighborhood was going to be great. But we've taken that, and I think we've done an excellent job for our clients and for ourselves now in the next cool neighborhood in St. Pete, which is Grand Central District, and also in neighborhoods over here in Tampa, right? So about 2.5 years ago, another set of partners of mine out of Chicago, Tandem Development and Campbell Street, no relation, and I got together, and we purchased 1.8 acres of land 3 blocks north of Armature Works, and it's at 2500 Tampa Street. It's the corner of Tampa and Columbus, for those of your listeners who are local. And I think we're doing a really incredible project there. We're doing 252 units of multifamily. It's a mix of studio, 1-bed and 2-bed apartments. And we're doing 10,000 square feet of retail, plus an additional almost 2,000 of micro retail, which is sub 300 square feet. And that is really, in a lot of ways, like a culmination of all the things that I've learned how to do, right? I'm so excited about that project because I get to take everything I learned in St. Pete, right? St. Pete is so well laid out for what we did over there and what we're doing currently. I mean, it's begging for it, right? And it's all the pieces are there. But Tampa's a little harder. Tampa's not as well connected. It's not as walkable. It's barely walkable in a lot of places. And so trying to find a way to create that same sort of narrative and create that same sort of exponential return from what really ends up being about 5% of the total square footage of a project it's a big lift, but I think we're going to do a great job. We've had some amazing conversations with some really cool operators, and we're not even broken ground yet. We'll be breaking ground so long as everything goes the way it needs to, sometime in Q1 of 2025.
Great.
Yeah, so, working on that, I have another project that I'm a part of in downtown Tampa. I know you know about it, but we purchased during COVID. That's always a fun story. During COVID, we purchased with partners, Kennedy Investments, a bankrupt telecom operator's single tenant net lease office building. So I don't know if you can picture anything more terrifying than that.
We'll share a picture. Yeah, we'll share a
Yeah,
picture.
I think I sent you some pictures. And that was the Frontier building. We actually, I was still working at Eastman when we did that, and John and I had put under contract the Tampa, the St. Pete, the Clearwater, and the Sarasota buildings, and then managed to kind of.
These are all like 5 to 10 story buildings with
Oh,
many windows.
Sorry, yeah, they're like 200,000 to 280,000 square foot office buildings, not occupied except for maybe 20% of them by Frontier. They're telecom buildings. They're rated for Category 4 hurricanes. So like to tear them down would probably cost a ton of money. You couldn't do it anyway, but yeah. And but what was really great about it was they were all in downtown. 2 of them were in qualified opportunity zones, which is another product type that you and I talk about all the time, but I love a good QOZ project. I've done several of them. And they all came with land, and all of the land was developable for tower construction. And we were like, this is a no-brainer. So we put together a really incredible deal, I think, and it took forever. And I think all of my gray hair is from that deal to this day. But we managed to spin off we spun off Sarasota, St. Pete, and Clearwater, and we held on to Tampa. And then Kennedy doubled down and purchased the Greyhound bus station building and another parking lot. And so we have over 3 acres of downtown prime real estate in Tampa, all zoned for tower construction. And we've got plans over the next handful of years to develop 2 mixed use products on the parking lot, and kind of an interim adaptive reuse of the Greyhound bus station. With down the road, that would be like a 3rd phase for development. And then with the Frontier building, that's pretty much done. Kennedy took the lead there and was really fantastic. They did a full gut inside, outside, and re-tenanted the whole thing. And it's now, a cash flowing multi-tenant office building. It's beautiful, and it doesn't look anything like it did when we bought it. But I guess I like interesting and hard to do projects. I think like really straightforward stuff is just kind of boring to me. It doesn't require nearly as much creativity.
Well, it's interesting because it was a series, and still continues in some areas to be a series of 1-story, small 1950s built, retail properties that have kind of over time been transformed into this mixed use kind of area. And I'm sure there's a lot of parallels there's definitely parallels between that type of placemaking and this larger scale placemaking. But from a marketing perspective, I mean, so much of it in my mind, so much of leasing, and I'm assuming you'll agree with me, Lauren, is marketing, right? Like how are you positioning your product, et cetera, and sharing it?
Almost all of it is marketing and psychology.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And psychology. Yeah. What's the right way to position this and share this with people? And I don't know. It's so Rachel and I have a lot of conversations about the digital presence, just to shift gears a little bit, the digital presence and how important that is when you're building a business today. Richard, did you have any questions on that? I think we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, Lauren, like you've accomplished so much, and it is interesting. Like you started off in a very traditional path and then having grown up in the environment. So I'm just also curious, like it sounds like you had great experiences, but there must have been something where you're like, I think I could add this innovation or bring in these new ideas. So I'm also curious, I'm sure you took what you learned, growing up in the environment and from some of these corporate companies and these salaried positions. But I'm very curious of, you know, where you decide to put your spin on things, or where you saw, you know, maybe it's always been done this way, and I feel like I can add, you know, whether it's with the, like you said, return on experience, marketing, some innovation or technology.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm sure you have a very fresh perspective, and I think everyone would love to hear it.
Thank you. Well, you know, I mean, I don't want to, excuse me, I don't want to take credit for like return on experience or anything like that, as we talked about, but I think that idea itself has driven so much of what I do and how I look at real estate and its online presence. And I think there's like several silos to answering John's question and your question. And I'll kind of start from the top. So I'm an 80s baby. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so the internet has been around, but I am just old enough to remember when it came about. But I do remember asking my mom and dad when they went on their honeymoon in 1979, they went to Jamaica, right? And when they went, I asked them, I said, well, hey, when you guys went, how did you know like where to go, what to eat, what to do, what was cool? And they were like, well, we just asked our friends, and we had like 3 friends who had been, and they were like, you should go to this restaurant, you should see this thing. And so we kind of did that. And my point there is that like prior to the internet's existence, and even for a while in its like 1.0 phase, you couldn't experience a place until you went to the place, right? And so that idea, that old adage of like real estate is location, 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 I agree, but I would say there's a 4th location in there, and that 4th location is actually at the front, and that's the internet, right? So like now if I go to Jamaica with my husband, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Pinterest, I'm in Reddit asking people what the coolest things to do are, I'm looking at Yelp reviews. I have my entire vacation planned in the Wanderlog app long before my plane takes off, right? And now I have a very, very curated experience that in some ways is an echo or a resonation of the vacuum I've placed myself in. This is the experience I want of Jamaica, and it's going to look a lot different than John's and a lot different than yours, right? So understanding who your clientele or your customer base is, or who you want that clientele and customer base to be, is just foundational to being successful with an online real estate presence. If you don't understand what that is, you need to go back to the drawing board and immediately figure it out. It is in my opinion, your biggest priority, because every single thing you do online, and that includes if you decide not to be online, is going to impact who and how someone experiences your place. Whether that place is a coffee shop that you own and you're just the guy like making espressos, or if you're a real estate dynasty like Blackstone or anything in between, right? So number one, I think like figuring out who you are and then making sure that that is known digitally is incredibly important for marketing. And it helps your whole team. It helps everyone involved in that real estate process be on the same page. As far as like what we do, right? So we're looking for opportunities for sale, for us to purchase, for our clients to purchase. We're looking for opportunities for our brokers to lease property. We're looking for opportunities for development. I use the internet all the time. Now, a lot of people in my world, and us included, have access to CoStar, LoopNet. Some of us have MLS. I find that to be less helpful, right? We have all of these like industry standard access points for finding deals. But John probably knows this, but like to go find something on LoopNet or CoStar listed is like, it's old news at this point, right? Because if you're really good at finding information, you've already picked all that over weeks or months ago, long before it made, someone made a flyer and slapped it up on CoStar. Instead, I'm far more interested in utilizing some of these public databases that a lot of people are not accessing. For example, there's a program called Accela, right? ACCELA. And not every municipality uses it, but a lot of our municipalities here in the state of Florida do. Unfortunately, St. Pete is not one of them right now, but we can cross our fingers for later. But Accela is, in the state of Florida, we have sunshine law, right? And everything has to be out in the sunshine. If I send something to a public office or a public person, so like think like a city council person, it's public record. And that has to be made available, or it can be made available if requested. So a lot of the development and construction silos within cities and municipalities, they just want to take out the hard part where people are constantly calling, asking for details on such and such address. And so they partner with Excella or programs like that to put everything into that program, so that number one, it streamlines the process for me as a developer or for you as a landlord to get permitting done, to submit applications for PD rezoning, whatever it's going to be. But number two, as a research person at heart, right, I can go in there and I can start pulling out things and finding attachments and realizing, oh, when I drove past this site the other day and I saw, you know, someone was there doing a phase 2, right? You see them soil boring. You're like, what's going on that site? You go pull the address in Excella, and I can see that they're doing a 17-story hotel with 5,000 square feet of retail at the bottom. So this is like really great intel. So I love to use public databases because they are so chock full of information that just like it doesn't show up in places like that. In CoStar.
Yeah, you really have to.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And then the other point that you made a minute ago, I wanted to circle back on it because it's such an important piece that it basically your story about, you know, your parents going to Jamaica, and like that's exactly how everyone functioned forever. Like, you know, everything was like, oh, my mother told me this or my friend told me this, and that's how you got information, was word of mouth. I still think word of mouth is super important because people that you trust, when people you trust tell you, oh, you should go there, then you immediately say, oh, well, I'll go do some research or whatever. But I feel like it just is to your point. I feel like we spend so much time online now that we are almost more likely to go somewhere that's got, you know, 5-star Yelp review or travel reviews, as opposed to, oh, someone told me this is good. Because, you know, like a certain family member, I won't say who, you know, frequently, you know, says, oh, you should go to this restaurant, it's great. And we've gone to a few of the restaurants, and they're not great, right? I love that person, they're a fantastic person. I don't really think they know what they're talking about when it comes to food. But there's this like tension between the online and then your relationship, your offline relationships. And there's a lot of, there's just so much value in being there online because you're the first, like when you mentioned, oh, maybe we'll go to Jamaica with your husband, then the first thing you think about is, oh, well, I've got my phone here, I'm going to look it up.
Exactly.
Right? You don't think to yourself, I'm going to call my mom and ask her what she did 30 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah, no. Yeah,
but to me, it's such an interesting time for marketing, for real estate marketing, for digital business marketing. That presence is so important, especially maybe speak a little more to building the business. Like, there's a group that I know in Texas, and they represent themselves as digital first. And I think that's kind of a marketing slogan, but how do you think of and I know you pretty well. So when it comes to, and I know that you're very big on relationship building, which is clearly extremely important part of our business, but where does the line exist between the relationship building and that digital presence? And to me, I'm still trying to figure that out.
I don't really know, you know, necessarily where that I'm at an end with what my online presence looks like, right? I'm really feeling like I'm always just at the beginning. When I think I get a little further, I learn so much more about what I want to be doing online that I'm like, oh wait, no, I'm not as far as I thought I was. But like, you know, you have the staples, right? You've got Instagram and you've got your website. And so like for me with our website, right, I really believe everything in real estate, everything in retail, it's all changed. It's all based on authenticity, our experiences, right? So like the idea that 90,000 followers for a great taco place online, they can't all be wrong. We're gonna go try the tacos, right? Right? And so like, and I teach that to my agents as well. I'm like, you know, Instagram is the best place to go find a new tenant for a project, see who's popular, what people are saying. You know, if they have got this kind of viral following, it's going to help your product your project as well. Because if you can make an announcement like a few months ago, one of my agents signed Violet Stone, right? She had, they were featured on Dave Portnoy's One Slice show, and they got the best rating in our entire market. And so they were already really, really popular. They had great following. And she went after them and she placed them into another project of ours and expanded them and was able to ride that. And it has gotten us additional leasing at that center because she understood the value of that online placement for that brand and how it could translate and transfer to the brand we were working on, which was this project. And I try and look at that lens for everything that we do. So our Instagram, I think, is very authentic because I want it to be that way. There's not a lot of corporate oversight as far as like structure. I'm constantly encouraging my agents to post what they're doing, where they're going, what they're seeing. Our website, if you were to go to our website, we just did a big rebrand. Our colors are different than other brokerage firms, right? They're more fun because we're fun, because what we do is really fun. It's not a dig at what they do. They're really great at what they do. But I can't fit inside of their corporate box and then say I do something different. So I have to show that authentically, right? And so I think for us, for our online presence and for our marketing presence in general, that's really my through line is like, who are we? Who are we trying to reach? And how are we doing that in an authentic way? And I think that trickles down into our theory about retail. What is this place about? Who are we trying to attract to this place? And how are we going to do that? So, for example, from a marketing standpoint of like who we go after for leasing for these really like kind of frankly cool neighborhoods, right? And these emerging neighborhoods, we're looking for great co-tenant, like great co-curation of tenancy. So you need a couple of boxes filled in these neighborhoods, and we try and authentically advertise those opportunities. So we need specialty retail. This is going to be boutique fashion, art galleries, pop-up space. I have to teach people how to monetize pop-up space, right? A lot of landlords think that it's only a red line in their pro forma, and I'm here to show you it can be very much a black line. You need obviously restaurant, F&B, so bar, yes, coffee, cocktail, brewery, etc. And then you need an active space, right? You need live music venue, you need entertainment, fitness, spa and wellness, things that people are physically doing. And I think part of that is about understanding that people want to be one of two things. And it's always, any day that you or I wake up, we feel differently about what we want to be. We either want to be the actor or the audience. And so in every great place, you have spaces for both actors and audiences, right? So, there's these different strategies that you can take when it comes to having authentic experiences and creating that through marketing. And the way that we kind of drive those narratives is we're looking for these core things, right? We're looking for accessible experiences. So something that everyone can participate in. This will be like, a coffee shop, an ice cream store, something that's like very low barrier to entry, where someone who's coming into your site or your property or your neighborhood feels like they're participating, and it's very low barrier to entry, so anyone can do it. We're looking for small format retail. As you know, John, you went to architecture school. It's really important to see like an undulation of facade and a changing of facade. It's great to see concepts that are spilling out onto the street and creating movement and momentum and kineticism. So we're looking for small spaces. We're fostering forgiveness and we're creating early adoption. So we're looking for really incredible purveyors of local concepts, because when the going gets tough, Starbucks will throw their keys back at me and, close out their LLC, and I'm kind of SOL. But the guy who threw his entire life savings and mortgaged his house to open his coffee and cocktail concept is going to stick by me, and we are absolutely business partners in that downturn. So I'm always looking for someone who's got a great following, a great eye, a great set of taste, who is going to be down in the ditch with me, right? Like really building this place. And then I think the last thing, just to wrap it up, is we're always looking for something to build around, to foster a sense of community around, and I call it something to shout about, but it's really about creating resonating experiences. In our market, right, downtown, Water Street built it around the Lightning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ybor City will have the Sun FC players, but they've also got this incredible historical content that's been built over 200 years in cigar factories that they build around. New York City has its own things, but you've got to give somebody something to rally around at the neighborhood and to really create a sense of place around. But yeah, you can do all of that with online presence and really great marketing and psychology.
Interesting. Yeah, I think one of the reasons that Rachel and I really wanted to have you on is just the way that you have a, similar to us, you have an institutional background with that experience, but also that perspective, but also you recognize the value of the local entrepreneur and how important it is to creating place. And I think it really resonates with us, and I'm sure it'll resonate with the audience. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today on Breaking New Ground. It's definitely been an awesome conversation, Lauren, and you've been a great guest. How can people get in contact with you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, they can reach us on our website, www.archergroupre.com. They can reach me on Instagram at archergroupre, or they can send me an email, lauren@archergroupre.com. And I'd love to hear from them.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thanks
one.
for having me.
All right.
We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on today's episode and what topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes.
Follow us on Spotify to be notified when our next episode is live. To connect with John and I, follow us on LinkedIn.
Thanks for joining us today on Breaking New Ground.